I'll ask you to monitor chat. I don't see it while I'm going. You can just like shout out if there's something that I need to pay attention to. I will kind of walk through these slides and talk to you about them as we go through. So here's the plan. We're gonna go through a couple of these steps here. My name's Sharif. I work on education at NEAR with Sasha. I am gonna ask you today, who are we? Where are we? Can we envision some shared goal and agree on some reasonable path through this experience? And then I want to talk to you for a minute on beginning well, basically. And at the end of this presentation, I will post a link into Discord for the next day's activity. Part of the discussion we're going to need to have today is what time do we post the activity? It's maybe end of the day for some people, and so maybe you prefer it earlier. I'm flexible on all this stuff, okay? So just stay in the conversation. You'll get an idea for what's going on. So who are we? Let's figure it out. How long have you been writing software? Please take a picture of this QR code and visit the site, or go to slido.com, type in NEAR NCD-1. If you need help with this, say something, please, but it should really take you about 5 seconds to open this and answer the question. So thank you for this. And of course, there's going to be some overlap between I have CS degree, so that this isn't exactly correct, because you may have checked greater than 5 years in a CS degree or 1 to 5 years in a CS degree. So in this case, the percentages are a little bit off, but it gives us an idea of what's going on. Okay, 18 people have responded. I'm going to move on now, unless anybody feels strongly about it. All right, so what tech is in your comfort zone? 19 answers, good enough for me. Mostly JavaScript and TypeScript, looks like. A couple of Rust developers, fantastic, thank you so much. I'm gonna assume 20 responses is good enough, and I'll clean up the data later. Moving on, what contract language are you gonna focus on this week? Okay, so 21 answers, moving on. Nobody here for the show? Okay, now what questions do you have right now, please, if you could tell me? Now if you would vote, please, on this, to help us prioritize these things. So let's answer some of these questions. What is TPS? Transactions per second. It's typically the metric that you use to measure, these public ledger performance, by saying how many transactions per second can you get as your throughput. Okay, that's what that is. And I'm just going to consider that answered. Oh my gosh. And mark it off now. Okay, so difference between Rust and AssemblyScript to talk about financial contracts. So there is a NEAR 101. If you go to near.org/learn, there's a guided workshop, NEAR 101, that discusses this in a little bit more detail. But briefly, it's this. The NEAR platform, the NEAR runtime, uses a WASM, WebAssembly virtual machine. That means the code that we run in this virtual machine has been compiled to WebAssembly, and then you deploy it and run it. The tool chain from Rust to WebAssembly, the tools and the way they work, the debugging, the optimization, all of the mechanism that goes from Rust to WebAssembly is the most mature in the industry. And so you can basically assert anything that you can guarantee in Rust is guaranteed in WebAssembly, and it's a very sophisticated tool chain. And then Rust as a programming language gives you some safety guarantees that are impossible to find in any language today. This is what makes Rust so exciting for systems developers in particular, when they're working on something that's sensitive, to memory allocation and deallocation errors, and kind of mechanisms of managing memory, especially because Rust has this model of ownership. Like, if you declare a variable, you're basically responsible for the lifetime of that variable, unless you explicitly allow someone else to take ownership or to borrow it. And there's a few of these words basically in Rust that would be common around this, but because of some of these features of the language, it's safe. And so with a smart contract, you want to minimize the chances, if you can reduce them to 0, that your contract is going to behave in some unexpected way. Obviously, for contracts with large financial assets under management, you want to be careful with what you're doing with those assets. And so because of the maturity of the Rust toolchain to WebAssembly, because of the safety of the language, it is a better choice for high value contracts. Very simple. AssemblyScript is a younger language, not so much in between writing AssemblyScript and WebAssembly, so you can almost read the WebAssembly as text easily. Try reading the WebAssembly as text generated by the Rust, and your brain will melt. But with AssemblyScript, it's actually pretty easy to read. So there's this sort of one-to-one relationship between the AssemblyScript and the WebAssembly that you're producing. That's nice. But because AssemblyScript is a new language, there's not so many guarantees, actually. It's not so considered so safe. And so when you're talking about building an application, a near, everybody always wants to drive the Formula One, but realistically, you can't go over speed bumps with a Formula One. So don't just think like, well, I have to have Rust because then I can do anything. Think instead, if I know JavaScript and TypeScript, I can learn AssemblyScript in an hour, maybe less. And so can the rest of my team, and so will 20 million other developers on the planet, or however many JavaScript there are developers now. So there's going to be more documentation, more support, more growth as this language matures. And if you want to rapidly prototype, it's going to be a much easier choice, because with Rust, you're going to spend a lot of time fighting the compiler. And I can show you what that looks like if you like. So hopefully that gives you a clear question in terms of Rust between AssemblyScript and why the choice. Of course, you can mix them in your project. You can have one contract that's written in AssemblyScript, one contract that's written in Rust. They might call each other. Let's say you write an application where you want to launch a DAO or something, set up a multi-sig contract, put some value into a token locker somehow, or an NFT contract. All those could be in Rust from our core contracts. You just clone them, but you can prototype and build your application very quickly using AssemblyScript for the other functionality, your other on-chain features that you have. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so let's call that one done, and we can come back to it if we need to. What are dev tools for Near? So this one more question, and then I'll punt these till later. So with Near, your development process is, and I can actually share with you some links on this, but we're not going to be looking at this until tomorrow, because I want you to focus on reading contracts, hopefully dozens of contracts today, so you can get a sense of all the different syntax that's involved in those. It'll make the rest of the week much easier as well if you load those into your head without worrying about like what to type. So in terms of the dev tools, you're basically using an IDE like CLion or Visual Studio Code, which is what most of the team uses actually. You're writing your code, contract code, maybe writing unit tests in the same environment, running those unit tests using NPM or Yarn. Yeah, Marco likes VS Code, exactly my point. So it's really pretty standard development process, no custom stuff, in the sense that you're not having to sort of learn some new tool or learn some esoteric language. It's all fairly standard in that sense. Yeah. Yeah, some people will like CLion, of course. Any Rust developers would prefer that, and that'll certainly be better for you. It's all of our core devs who write in Rust every day use CLion. So hopefully that gives you an idea. And so you're basically writing the contract, maybe writing unit tests, maybe writing simulation tests, maybe also building your front end, React, Vue, Angular, whatever your flavor is. And then you wire them up with a little bit of glue. The glue is what you would expect from any API call. So the Near platform has an RPC API, remote procedure call API, that just takes JSON over HTTP. You can do that raw from the curl, from the command line if you want to, or you can use our Near CLI at the command line to call the network. But from your application, you'll be using something called Near API.js. Just a library, gives you some abstractions. This is an account, this is a contract, call these methods. And so you're writing in JavaScript and calling that API. That's how you build the application. And all of this will become incredibly clear probably within 24 hours from now. And I'm hoping to convince you each to build an application by the end of the week. Some in groups, maybe some of you will stretch and actually build your own individual application. I think that'll be awesome. Okay, so let's assume this one is done, and then let's keep going. So if there aren't any votes for the other ones, we'll just leave them for later. This slide will be kind of marking a transition, you know. So where are we right now? That's who's here in the room. You saw the answers to those questions. Where are we? Very briefly, some of you know this better than I do, so I'm not going to kind of inflict my perspective, except to spend maybe a minute on this. If you imagine a sort of a rainbow, you know, of progress from somewhere in the mid 1900s reaching into this decade, Web 0 shrunk computers down from the size of a house to the mobile phone in your pocket that is always connected with high-speed internet. The readable web, maybe starting with ARPANET through universities, you know, Encyclopedia Britannica Online and AOL, down to you can ask Siri today for the weather tomorrow, and Siri will read the web to tell you. The writable web, starting with maybe bulletin board systems in the 80s, through you know, HTTP, HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript or whatever to make things blink, and then social networks to TikTok and what's the thing everybody's on today? The perpetual phone call. People spend like 5 to 10 hours a day talking about blockchain on it. I can't remember. Maybe one of you knows the name of this.
Clubhouse.
Clubhouse, yeah. So there's the writable web for you, and the trusted web, starting in maybe you could say 1976 with Diffie-Hellman's paper and crediting Merkle for public key cryptography, Chom in the early 80s with a bunch of ideas that led effectively, I think, to something he called eCash. And then Hashcash with Szabo, Nick Szabo's Hashcash, Adam Back and some of his you know, work, conversations with Wei Dai and B Money, some people, you know, calling him Satoshi. 2008, a paper getting published that basically combines you know, BitTorrent, sort of decentralized computing and storage, cryptographically verifiable signatures and transactions, and a triple ledger, public ledger. So not the single ledger, the double ledger of you know, the last few hundred years, but a triple ledger with a public copy. Those three technologies together form Bitcoin. And then on top of that, Ethereum with a Turing complete virtual machine. And now with, you know, the half dozen or dozen organizations competing to solve scalability and speed and cost. So that's the trusted web, effectively a layer on top of which we can put anything we care about, because this layer makes it too expensive to lie. It is effectively the truth. Some people call it a trust machine, and on top of this thing now we can basically put you know, things like identity, money, ownership, provenance, all the stuff. Provenance is like, you know, where did something come from? All of the things that actually matter to us as human beings, and the idea is that this is potentially transformative. If you watch the videos in the day zero, there was a series of 4 or 5 videos that would basically paint this picture for you. And so what we've got now is DAOs, token economics and mechanism design, basically starting backwards with, you know, how to create incentive systems, and total disintermediation. You know, a civics API that lets you decide how you want to help out in the local government. Maybe, you know, you can request a speed bump as easily as you can, you know, I don't know, file a report about having seen some bird somewhere that shouldn't be there. Border API, where we can programmatically, you know, enhance border crossings in ways that are amenable to us or localizable. Effectively a humans API with incentivization programs. But now I'm just waving my hands around. I don't actually know what I'm talking about. So if you kind of look at the market, Bitcoin, we just talked about this cryptographically verifiable transactions, decentralized storage and compute, and a public ledger. Ethereum is Bitcoin technology plus the Turing complete virtual machine with on-chain inputs and outputs, the code and the data being saved on chain. The problem here is that it's expensive, low throughput, and hard to scale. And so Near, Polkadot, Solana, Avalanche, and others are solving this. You know, Cardano, Dfinity, well, anyway, lots of others. I guess about 10 or 15 companies. Some of you probably know this list better than I do. And a huge grain of salt, please, with this image, because I got some serious pushback from folks on the team that this is a ridiculously simplified picture and almost doesn't make any sense. So please forgive me, but I do think it's useful in the sense that if you think about sort of how these different organizations are trying to scale, Near has these transactions coming in. The transactions get routed to a different shard depending on the receiver account. I know the most about Near, obviously, and then that creates what's called an action receipt in that the next block that's available. That action receipt might generate multiple other action receipts, the cross-contract calls, basically across shards, which are then resolved into data receipts to get back the result to whoever the caller was. And again, overly simplified mechanism here, but that's basically the scalability story is the yellow highlighted multiple shards in Near. Currently, mainnet's running on one shard. Before the end of the year, it'll be running on, I guess, 8 shards or something like that. Sorry, somebody had a question? No? Okay. Yeah, feel free to interrupt, by the way, highly interruptible. So just because I like to hear the sound of my own voice doesn't mean you can't stop me and say something. Um, so, um, so Polkadot taking in transactions to different parachains, while on Near, each shard is homogeneous. It's the same kind of transactions, but basically scaling outwards. In Polkadot, the parachains are heterogeneous, meaning they're different. They could have their own economy, their own token, their own dynamics, their own rules. And that's one of the strengths of Polkadot is you can basically design your own blockchain and then hook it up to the relay chain. And their scalability story comes from these parachains, 50 to 100 parachains, whatever you can add. And then more so secondary parachains. So this kind of goes out, if you imagine like a fractal tree kind of growing out at the leaves with parachains. I don't know how many layers it goes, maybe 2 or 3, I'm not really sure, but I've only seen mention of secondary parachains. In the end, it's a pretty big scalability story. Solana, their scalability story is in parallelizing work that has been predetermined in terms of time. So there's a leader that basically timestamps every single transaction as it comes through. That's the little timer right there. Then things get parallelized, transactions, they get processed in parallel and then aggregated by something, I guess, called an archiver, where you can see transactions 1, 2, and 3 are sequenced now in the proper order. Okay. Again, if you know more about this than I do, I need you to say something, in Discord or in this meeting and say, you know what, that's totally wrong. I'll get you a better picture. I would be so grateful to you. This isn't about what I know. This is about framing the conversation, okay? Avalanche here basically specializing 3 different chains, C chain for, EVM related work like Ethereum, an X chain for token exchange, token economics, that kind of stuff, I guess, and then a P chain for governance related work. Different chains, they don't talk to each other, is my understanding. They kind of do their own thing. And there was some news about the C chain recently, for example, that was, recovered very well and all sorts of sort of activities. So if you hear about that or you read about Avalanche in the news, for example, this will give you a mental model for what's happening there. And obviously the team, is handling that as effectively as any of these other teams are. So it's so far it seems like everybody's got an interesting story, and again, this is not potentially accurate. And it's certainly not complete. There's a lot more detail to all of this stuff. I just wanted to give you something to hold on to, like what are people doing to try and solve this problem? And here's my thinking on it, okay? Also would love the feedback and comments if you do happen to know more about this stuff than I do. Let's envision the goal now, please. What are we about to do? I am hoping that you are agreeing to join the Near Learning community. Okay, this isn't some kind of thing like you show up and you're like, yeah, check the box. My manager told me to be here. If that's why you're here, no problem, welcome, but I don't think you're gonna get as much out of this as you possibly can. So I would hope that everybody in this room by the end of the week can commit to the following: identifying areas of unproductive confusion locally in the community as we'll practice, but also globally in the Near community, converging on the best resolution, like what can we do to help people understand, producing some modular artifacts like these things that you see on the screen that I created here, collecting and curating feedback, to maintain quality, and then building some incentivization mechanisms, rewards, maybe a DAO that rewards people for doing this kind of work. On the right-hand side are the 8 primitive transactions that you can do with Near, categorized as identity, money, and code, for example. And we'll learn all about those before the end of the week. And then below that is some diagram of interacting with, a chain link, I guess, as an oracle. And then below that is a schematic of the bridge, which is explained in great detail in NEAR 102. Again, near.org/learn guided workshops, NEAR 102. You'll find that image with a lot more explanation and me talking if you're not tired of hearing me talk yet. So let's agree on how we're going to move through this. NEAR developer is pretty clear. What does certification mean here? So who is actually certifying you? What is being certified exactly? I would call this certification light, because we've only got, what do we say, 5 days for some people to go from, I don't know what a blockchain is, to building an application. And other people who've maybe been building for several years now on Ethereum, learning NEAR. So it's a completely different level of engagement and experience. And so we have to treat this for what it is. This week is about reading, writing, testing, deploying, and the gestalt, like the whole of what it means to build applications on NEAR. But if we talk about like real certification, here's some ideas: security reviews, cost estimation, NEP standards, and like EIP standards, but for NEAR, domain-specific solutions, platform futures, engaging in the conversations, the GitHub issues, and the discussions on the forum, and all of that kind of stuff. Because basically, what we're really talking about is deploying like forever code on mainnet that deals with identity and money. So it's hard to imagine that in a couple of hours a day in 1 week that you can feel any sense of confidence about doing that. So that's why I'm calling this certification light, and it's really like a step in the process. What's in? Testnet, localnet, and betanet. What's out? Mainnet. We're not going to be talking about deploying to mainnet this week. If you want to deploy to mainnet because YOLO, that's on you. But I think there's more to it than that. Security constraints that you need to be thinking about. How are you going to version your contract? What are you going to do if things get really popular? How are you going to manage security and access keys? So it's a much bigger conversation to have there. So we're not going to be talking about mainnet, but we will be talking about testnet, which is essentially a copy of mainnet. It's like pre-mainnet. No difference in terms of the binaries there, but testnet doesn't have real value on it, and there's a faucet. It's really easy to sign up an account. You get 200 NEAR. You can start working with it like in an instant. LocalNet is you clone NEAR core and then you run it locally with a Python program called NearUp, and you'll have a local net running of one node that you can build against if you don't want to build in public. So that's also interesting. And then BetaNet, if you're really keen on working with the Ethereum virtual machine, which is running in a contract on NEAR, if you want to do that, then you'll need BetaNet, because that's the only place you can find it. We'll talk about contract literacy, but not contract security. That's out. We'll talk about NFTs, fungible tokens, some of the other standards that we have, but we're not going to talk about like token economics design and mechanism design and stuff like that. Way out of scope, and I'm not qualified to talk about it. We'll talk about the core contracts, but we won't talk about porting Uniswap to NEAR. Like, I don't even know if I could estimate the level of effort of that if you gave me a week. And then we'll talk about cross-contract calls, because that's the mechanism for scaling NEAR, but we won't talk about the machinery of sharded compute and storage, because again, I'm not qualified to talk about that. We have a white paper, we have other experts internal that we can invite to share conversations with you, but we're going to be focused on reading, writing, testing, deploying, and then thinking about the application as a whole. Okay, so just heads up, that's what's happening this week. Here's how it's going to happen. Every day we meet at 2 p.m. UTC, Monday 60 minutes, Friday 60 minutes, every other day 30 minutes, with a cap of 2 hours for the meeting if we want to go over. Synchronously, in this time today, the welcome and the kickoff, that's happening right now. For the rest of the week, it's going to be a little bit of process adjustments for 30 minutes and aha moments. So we might spend 25 minutes on, oh, I realized this, I learned this, I saw this, I like this. And, why don't we share links in this other way? Or why don't we make these other channels in Discord? It'll be better for us, right? Whatever process is and realizations, that's the 30 minutes. And then the other 90 minutes, if people have questions, they want to stay online, you want to pair a program together, anything like that, no problem. I'm at your service. Fridays, heads up, demos. Every single team, we'll talk about teams in just a couple of minutes, will be expected to deliver a demonstration. So what is that demonstration of? Not necessarily of a working application with a front end, but I'll show you very shortly here exactly what I mean by that demo. It will be a presentation though, and it will be a package that's complete. And then of course, we'll say goodbye on Friday. Asynchronous activities. So today, reading, tomorrow, writing, the day after, testing, then deploying, and then documenting your demo if you need to kind of clean up the docs. You should start thinking today about the demo. Don't wait, start today. Don't wait, start today. Here it is. This is the demo. At the end of the week, each small group will present a project of your own design and development. The scope is defined by this linked project, github.com/learnnear/nearly neighbors. You can see here, there's a concept, an example story. I don't know if you could read these slides if it's too small, but right here in the middle, there's the word concept, example story, the list of contracts that you've got here, how they work, installation instructions, yarn, test unit, whatever, simulate, all this kind of stuff, and then some balsamic kind of low fidelity front end sketches here to give you an idea of how this application is actually going to work. So this one works. You can go and run the unit tests right now and they'll work. So what you should include at least is contracts, Rust, AssemblyScript, maybe a mix of both if you decide to do that, working unit tests, working simulation tests, mockups that are sensible. You can understand what the thing does from the mockups, and some documentation, builds, tests, how do you kind of use a thing? And the ultimate measure of success is, can we learn from this? Because what we're going to be doing is collecting all of these under learn near. So every single one of these groups that moves through, you being the first, welcome. I couldn't be more excited about that. Every single group that moves through this is going to produce artifacts that help future groups. And in that way, I hope that we can produce this kind of learning community that improves on itself and grows with the platform. And if we're lucky, produces ideas which are almost at the finish line for any Web 2 developer that wants to pick this up and say, I want to build on blockchain. I want to build something non-trivial, but I don't have time to learn all the blockchain stuff. Like, what can I do? You can start with any one of these applications. Here's the front end designs. Here's the working contracts, tested, simulated, and ready to go. All right. So that's the goal of the demo. It's not an easy ask. This is going to be hard. All right. So let's talk about beginning well. We've all been 3 years old. That's before you start to censor yourself with shame, like you want to impress somebody or you want to do the right thing, before you even start noticing what it means to make a good drawing. My daughter's 4.5 now. She's hesitating. She'll draw something, I'll draw something. She'll say, but Daddy, yours is so much better than mine. She's only started saying and even noticing that in the last maybe 3 or 4 months. So at 3 years old, the world is just a huge opportunity for learning. In fact, she told me about 6 months ago, Daddy, do you know what my job is? My job is to try. And I would like you to adopt exactly that same mentality, please. For the rest of this week, your job is to try without any shame, without any hesitation, without flinching for a second. Ask the question, try and give an answer if you think you know it. And if you're not sure if the question got answered, ask it again. If you're not sure if the answer was received, try it again. And in that way, without any judgment, without any fear, we'll all get much better this week. Okay. And I'm hoping that I can encourage you to lean into this with me. So what is this experience? Cooperative, continuous, non-zero sum game. We're going to be working together. This isn't just a week. Your reputation will live with you in the near community after this. So keep that in mind. Helping other people privately or publicly, both helps you. Privately because teaching is a good way to learn. Publicly because obviously your reputation in the community will grow. And you don't have to isolate your help and your questions to just our Discord server, by the way. That's just for us to organize our work. You can always go to the public Discord server and help, answer, ask, whatever you want to do there. This is a diverse, psychologically safe engagement. I just want to be super clear about this. So zero ego is going to be tolerated. Like, even if you are the smartest person in the room, that's fantastic. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. But don't use that as a weapon on other people to, yes, but, or yes, actually, or to kind of push other people out of the way to kind of prove that you're the smartest person or smarter than the person you're working with. Really, zero ego. ego is going to be tolerated this week. If you need help with that, just ask me. I'm happy to work with you. I've worked with thousands of adults in this kind of environment, and even much more intense environments, working side by side for 12 to 15 hours a day. So I'm more than happy to help you manage, like, this person's moving a little bit too fast for me, or this person, they're not really keeping up. What should I do? I'm worried about the demo on Friday. Let me help you. Just ask. And then we're working together well. We know when the quietest person feels welcome to speak. So if you're having a meeting, not like this one where I'm taking up all the air in the room, but where you're actually meeting as a team, and someone isn't talking, I would recommend, before you say the next thing, count to 3, 4, 5. Give them a little bit of room to think about what they want to say. It might feel awkward for a few seconds, but when they add their perspective, almost always it's going to help. And then a demonstration of capability. By the end of the week, every small group, we're going to break up into groups shortly, every small group has to deliver a demonstration according to what we saw a minute ago with Nearly Neighbors. And in terms of certification, let's say this is your first step in the path towards earning certification. So by the end of this, I'm happy to give out any number of certificate of completion, certificate of participation, any of that kind of stuff. But as I said earlier, if we talk about actually certifying someone so that people know that you know how to ship software on Near, the only proof of that is that you're shipping software on Near. And so almost certainly there will be, as part of this program, which we're in the process of designing, something like demo, code review, pair programming with an experienced Near developer, et cetera. Because that's what a certification ought to be, not just a paper stamp. You want this also, because if the certification means nothing, then why do you care to have it? So in that sense, we're working on this together. If you have an idea of an amazing certification program that you like, you want to see this be like that one, please share your ideas about that. I'd love to hear them. But we're in the process of designing this, and this is step number 1. So commit yourself now, please, to being shamelessly selfish, to demand what you need. That means, without any hesitation, just keep asking till you get what you need. And sustainably generous. So be generous, but don't burn out. You have to sleep, you have to eat. If you tried once, twice to help somebody and they didn't understand what you were saying, that's fine. Maybe you can say, hey, look, I don't know a better way to explain this, but maybe someone else can. There's no shame in that. You're not being mean, you're just being sustainably generous. If it's late and you want to go to sleep and there's one more question on Discord, just turn your phone off and go to sleep. So shamelessly selfish, sustainably generous, and everything else works out. I promise you. If you have a question, ask until it's answered. And if you have an answer, keep giving it until it's refined. Don't just give it once, but keep giving it several times. Okay. And hopefully that helps everybody make sense of what's going on. Yeah, so there is no truffle for Near, but that would be amazing if you have the capability and capacity to build something like that. You should totally go for it. The closest thing we have is something like Near Up, where you build a local net. But again, there's a lot of details in Truffle around auto-generating of keys and accounts and funding and resetting contract state and a whole bunch of cool stuff that you won't find on Near. It's just not that mature. So that's the answer there, and I'll just assume that's good enough. You can ask it again if it's not. Look, if you are not good with JavaScript, that doesn't really matter. You don't need JavaScript to build on Near. We just make it easy for JavaScript developers because that is sort of the most popular skill on the planet right now. But if you only know Rust, or you only know backend without Node and Go, for example, something like that, maybe Rust will be easy for you to learn. And then for your front end, you might use Go and use the JSON RPC API from Go to communicate with Near. No problem at all. That totally works. And in fact, I think there's a bounty for building a wrapper for the Near API in Go, and C# and C++ and Python and any number of other languages that you can imagine. So if you're curious about that, feel free to go for it. But you don't have to know JavaScript, although some of this from the front end, especially web page, will be easier if you do. All right, and I'm happy to help you with that. Okay. And then any best practices when debugging. Yeah, so it depends. If you're in AssemblyScript, then there's no there's kind of a step through debugger, but it's a little bit finicky. You're using the node debugging, connection with Visual Studio Code. I can show you how to do that, but it's not as smooth as like debugging Rust with C-line, which is a dream, right? Even in Visual Studio Code, you can debug Rust if I'm remembering correctly, and it's just much easier there. So you can use logging in both environments, AssemblyScript and Rust, no matter which language you're coding with, and you would basically be logging and adding visibility in that way. That's kind of the primary mechanism for doing this. But again, with C-line, you can. I'm sure you can debug Rust. I think you can debug Rust with Visual Studio Code. With AssemblyScript, there is a way to debug. I'm happy to show you how to do that, but it's a little bit finicky, and you've got to kind of skip over some AssemblyScript, kind of preamble or whatever they call it, to get out of like the core code and focus on your own. So I don't know if that's a satisfying answer, but I'll stop there. Okay. What prerequisites we need to learn Rust with you lads? Yeah, so if you want to try Rust, you should totally start by reading all the Rust contracts today. Read every single one. Don't read just one of them, read all of them. And I'll explain the exercise today, but you're basically going to be moving through a body of 20 or 30 contracts like you would move through a museum. You're not like stressing about every dot on every painting. You're not trying to recreate the painting yourself. You're just looking at it. And then you're looking at the next one, and you're looking at the next one, reading through the code, getting used to the syntax, looking for things that are interesting, and then maybe shrinking down the set to maybe a few of them, 5 of them that you are really interested in, and really studying those after having read all of them. And those that you really study, you might want to clone the repo, run some tests, try editing it, try building it, try logging, try deploying it. But I wouldn't stress about doing anything other than reading today. The more you read, the easier the rest of the week is going to be, because your mind will build automaticity around the syntax of the code. You'll stop thinking about, how does a contract look, because you will have seen 30 of them. And so you'll start focusing on what the contract does instead of what some syntactical details are here or there. Okay, so hopefully that helps. And then if you want to try and learn Rust, I would read those contracts and maybe the first couple of chapters of like the standard Rust book online. Writing Rust is more of a challenge because you're going to be fighting with the compiler for most of the week. So brace yourself for that. If you want to try and learn Rust and Near at the same time, I personally wouldn't recommend it, but maybe you've got 80 hours this week to lean into this, and so this is the week that you get that done. But it's not going to be casual by any means. It's going to be even more difficult. All right. And then if you're asking me, I prefer to write contracts in AssemblyScript because I'm more comfortable with that. I'm a JavaScript developer, Ruby developer, before that Java developer. So I'm comfortable with AssemblyScript. It's no problem at all. Rust, I spend a lot of time fighting with the contract, with the compiler, unfortunately. So that I'll get better at that, I guess, with more practice. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what I do. And then if I want to do something that's, managing some high value, I'll use one of the core contracts, a DAO or a multi-sig or a lockup or something like that. Okay, when mining will die? Probably won't, because there will be an ensemble of networks running all over the world, and somewhere electricity will be cheaper than hardware. And what's up with the moon meme? Yeah, I don't know. Everybody wants to know about mooning and stuff. So apologies if it's not funny. Trade-offs between Near and ETH from a security perspective, that I feel like I'm not really qualified to answer. I'm also not qualified to answer how the Rainbow Bridge is atomic. We can use NFTs and fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens. There's a couple of demos that I can link you to. You'll see some of those contracts today in your review. Hopefully that answers your question there. Yeah, so this is tricky here. If you're new in all things programming, this week is going to be very difficult for you. But you can watch this recording. You can ask more questions. Feel free to hit me up individually, one-on-one. Maybe what I can do is help you figure out what you can learn over the next few weeks or month or two, so that you can join a later class and focus on contract development. Then, I wouldn't recommend that someone start learning software with blockchain. That combination doesn't make sense. You can spend the week kind of getting an idea of what this stuff is about and see some cool demos at the end of the week. But if it's your first time writing software, I would really just pretend like you're watching a movie for this week on Discord and here, and not stress about it, because there's a lot of stuff that is going to be moving too fast for someone that hasn't ever written a program before, for example. All right. All right, and feel free to ping me on Discord to talk about that. When Moon, what other tips, Sasha, for the rest of the week to get up to speed? Yeah, so look, bottom line is, as we agreed, very simple. Stay connected with each other, keep asking questions, do more than you think you should be doing. And if you go to sleep every night with a little bit of a headache, your stomach's a little bit sick, you're feeling kind of dizzy, that's the right place you want to be. Every single day this week, get to that point, then go to sleep, wake up in the morning, you'll be smarter. It's amazing. It totally works. All right. So that's my best advice there. And yeah, you can definitely learn enough about Rust that's applicable to a standalone, but we're learning Rust in the context of Near. And I want to be clear, I'm never going to spend time like typing something on the screen and then you type something on your screen. That's not going to happen this week. Maybe to help you understand how I see this, as a teacher, I am an obstacle to your learning. I need to get out of your way as quickly as possible, actually. It's not that I know something and I'm going to give it to you. I know about a bunch of things over there. I need to get you looking and seeing those things as quickly as possible and support you as you start running towards those things. That's how I see what's happening here. So in terms of learning Rust as a standalone programming language, you're not learning about it as a framework for web development. You will be exposed to thousands of lines of Rust. And if you choose to read and write contracts in Rust, then you'll be learning Rust, syntactically speaking. So hopefully that helps answer that question. And then the teams we're going to build up literally right now. Please use the spreadsheet to add your name. We want to optimize for the next two things. Okay, this is important. Same time zone. So you might have to check with each other what time zone you're in, or maybe put your time zone next to your name. That would be easier actually. And then try and work with people that you don't already know. So one sort of mistake you can make this week is to just like pair with the person that you work with every day. Because you're not going to meet anybody new and you're not going to learn anything about how other people think, right? So the diversity of mental models in this group is a key. And then you want to hold each other accountable to this stuff. So because you're working with people you don't know, you're going to have to make sure that you speak to people in a way that is compelling for them. Hey, come on, you can do this. Let's do the work. Let's get into this. Like, let's get ready. And you're going to want to set up times to meet, for example, right? So every day you're probably going to spend some time meeting together, planning the work together. How are you going to do it? What did you learn? What are we going to build for the demo? It would be a perfect thing to meet about now, for example, or a little bit later, or maybe early tomorrow morning if you're in a late time zone. Okay. So hopefully that's pretty clear. And I'll just say thank you here and have fun together.